was, I would call, abused because the original earth was dug out. So they excavated all the good soil and dumped from constructions the leftovers. Also my neighbors who grow professionally, they basically said, forget about it, you will not grow anything of value in this strip of land.
Right.
And the first experiments with some tomatoes, some peppers, they just would not grow without adding any chemical fertilizer, and then soon many diseases hit. So of course then comes the pesticide. I was asking myself, this cannot be how nature deals with things. Like, how can it be that a plant cannot grow healthy without the human basically trickle feeding it these chemicals?
Right.
And so that's where I started going deeper into the research of regenerative farming, permaculture principles. Basically, I found, for me, the missing link in this soil is the microbiology, which are fungi, microbes, earthworms, and all those things. You put them in your irrigation water and just irrigate them frequently. You leave the soil life alone. You let it grow naturally. And they then will take care of a lot of problems for you. Later, when the plants get healthier and stronger because they have allies in the soil, also insects and other pests, they will not easily attack your plants. So you don't need pesticides. That's all I'm doing on this land, and for 2 years now, I can say that it really changed the shape. In the beginning, it looks like a weedy patch of different grasses and stuff, but actually you see rows of tomatoes which are just planted directly into soil. I've not tilled it, I've not got rid of all the other plants. I've just mowed it, and I'm trying to get plants like more clover and these shorter plants. And only where I'm planting the crop, I actually dig a hole and then cover it really well up so it doesn't dry out, and I do not have too much other grasses competing for water. With the drip irrigation, I'm watering it once a day a little bit, and once a week I give it these microorganisms that I grow in these composts. So also my neighbor's growing in this zone. He comes by, looks at the health of the plants, and he says, for this location, for this time of the year, that's the best tomatoes he's seen right now. Here on this specific part, because we have also the lake very near and it gets very moist, tomatoes usually have a lot of different fungal diseases, and I'm not getting any of those, almost none. I might have 2 of those. We can look at the other side. This is like the normally like a tilled space,
Right.
and I had to start from really ground zero because there were just I could not get a shovel into the ground because it was just rocks and really bad. So I had to break it up once, and now I'm feeding it these microorganisms, and I will show you a patch of land in the greenhouse, which is the same soil, but there I already did this process.
Okay.
And you could basically dig in with your hands. So this is some of the weeds and grasses that I would want to get rid of slowly because they stick in all over your socks and feet once they're ripe.
Thanks for warning me before I came.
I'm sorry. So look at this now. These are my apricots this year.
Oh wow. How many did you have last year?
5.
Total.
5.
How many trees do you have?
I think there are about 15 to 20 apricot trees. So here you see, for example, that I get a lot of insects. they like this plant, and I'm still fine with that as long as I see I'm getting fruit.
Right.
And I'm trying to get the trees as healthy as I can, because then during that time also natural enemies of this bug will occur, and it will balance itself out if I create enough living space.
Right.
For the other insects and predators of that insect. But this year it turned out to be nice. my neighbor again, he's really helping me and wants to see how is this working, and this always brings him to the point where he gives me any help, like he gave me the greenhouse. That's where I understood that, okay, these kind of things, they are interesting also to other people in Albania maybe, because more and more people understand the problems of heavy pesticide use. And especially bigger farmers are getting into this conventional agriculture, which uses a lot of chemical fertilizers, and it is really a short-term process.
Right.
So it will not go well long in the same piece of land.
Right.
And what do you do with the land? I haven't found out what this is exactly, but I've just noticed that lettuces that I grow here, and they tend to be well and eatable way longer than bought vegetables.
It's gotta be the pesticides, right?
I have no idea, to be honest. Where my neighbor told me that it's the nitrate they grow them up with artificially. So the added nitrate, so the chemical fertilizer,
Right.
which makes them wilt quicker. But I haven't really researched that.
I mean, I've got these cucumbers and stuff right next to it here, this next bed over. These cucumbers have yellowy leaves. They've been fed. It's like I need to come out here and give them more fertilizer. I feel like, you know, we'll get 6 inches of rain in a rain event, and everything just washes through. It burns through. The organic matter burns out. But here it looks like I'm growing in incredible, rich volcanic soil. I mean, look at the tomatoes forming. These great big beautiful blooms. There's some little tomatoes starting to form down here. I've actually got to prop these guys up again. They're growing so fast.
Fascinating pieces of evidence in South America have come out recently about these channels and pathways that they've found in the Amazon that could not have been created any other way but by humans.
Absolutely.
Creating irrigation, humans creating, like, it appears like grids, like a city grid.
Definitely. The Amazon is a colossal mystery, and it's one of the subjects that I explore in depth in America before. First of all, to give some basic figures, the Amazon basin is huge. The Amazon basin is 7 million square kilometers in area. And within it, 5.5 million square kilometers remains almost entirely unstudied by archaeologists. And that's the 5.5 million square kilometers that is still covered by dense rainforest. And to put that into perspective, 5.5 million square kilometers is the size of the entire Indian subcontinent. So it's like saying, we've done world archaeology, but we've just ignored India, you know. We've done world archaeology, but we've just ignored the Amazon. It's the same argument. 5.5 million square kilometers. The view was, again, there was a dogma. There was a preconception. Human beings couldn't have flourished in the Amazon. It's not a resource-rich area. The soils are poor. It's a difficult area, challenging to get to, very far from the Bering Straits. So the view was that humans hadn't entered the Amazon until about 1,000 years ago. And then gradually, little by little, that view has begun to change. And it's begun to change because of the tragic clearances of the Amazon, because the Amazon rainforest is literally being cut down and turned into soybean farms and cattle ranches. And in that cutting down process has emerged things that shouldn't be there at all. For example, evidence that large cities flourished in the Amazon, enormous cities, which were larger than there was a Spanish explorer who went down the Amazon River system in 1541 to 1542. He was the first European to cross the entire length of South America from west to east along the Amazon. He reported seeing incredible cities, advanced arts and crafts, millions of people, a thriving culture. And 100 years later, when other Europeans got into the Amazon, they couldn't find these cities. So they said, oh, Francisco Orellana, that was his name, made it all up. It was just a fantasy. And then in the last decade, as the clearances of the Amazon have proceeded, we've begun to see the traces of those cities. What happened was that the Spaniards brought smallpox into the Amazon. Smallpox devastated the local population because there was no immunity to it. There was a massive die-off. The cities were deserted. Within 50 years, they were completely overgrown by the jungle, and that's why they were not seen by the explorers who came in 100 years later. But now the jungle's being cleared, those cities are emerging, and we can say that a city like London, which had a population of roughly 50,000 in the 16th century, there were cities of that size all over the Amazon. Wow. Huge numbers of them. And a possible total population of the Amazon that exceeded 20 million people.
What?
Yes, 20 million. This is the latest evidence from the Amazon. And then you ask yourself, how did they do that? How did they feed 20 million people in the Amazon? Because it's a fact, rainforest soils are poor. It's one of the reasons these soybean farms are a really stupid idea, because once you clear the rainforest, the land is largely unfertile and you can't grow stuff on it for very long. So how did they feed all these people? The answer was they invented a soil. And that soil has a name. It's called terra preta. Archaeologists refer to it as Amazonian dark earths or Amazonian black earth. It's a man-made soil. It's thousands of years old. It's full of microbes that are not found in adjoining soil. It's based around biochar. And you can take a handful of 8,000-year-old terra preta and you can add it to barren soil, and that soil will instantly become fertile. It's highly sought after in the Amazon, and it explains how they fed these people. There was science in the Amazon.
How did they create this?
Well, this is something that's not understood. It's still not understood by soil experts to this day as to how that was done, but it's one of many intriguing pieces of evidence of much higher development in the Amazon that it has been given credit for, and of a kind of science in the Amazon.
Jamie's got an image of it up there. So this is it?
This is terra preta, yeah. Exactly,
wow.
Exactly. And
so was that done by burns? Did they use controlled burns?
They did. One way that it was achieved was to do wet burning. Of middens. They would be burned and smolder. They wouldn't burn fiercely, which just produces charcoal. They would burn and smolder, and that what is called biochar would result, and that's part of the fertility of the soil. But the mystery is the microbial content of this soil, which is completely different from the microbes in neighboring soils, and that remains unexplained.
So, what are the theories? Composting, some sort of advanced composting?
Yes, some sort of advanced composting. But again, what has not been explained is the microbial content of these soils. So there, first of all, is an issue of how two things: how large populations get fed in the Amazon, and evidence that there was a culture in the Amazon that was capable of manipulating the environment in such a way that it could support large populations with the invention of terra preta. Secondly, new evidence previously not recognized: the Amazon is basically a garden. The Amazon is a man-made rainforest.
Have layers. So you start off with a canopy layer. That's the top of the forest. Then you have understory layers. And under those you have bush and shrub layers, going down to herbaceous layers, which are non-woody plants. And then you have a root yield. You have plants that actually have large starchy roots. And then on the ground you have ground covers, and you also have a vertical layer of climbers. Now all forests have those layers. In the tropics you can have emergent palms and understory palms, and you can have slight variations in different climates, but you have a basic set of layers that occupy all the space. When we design a food forest, we put that layering system into action to our benefit for production and maintenance through function. Here in the subtropics, you have tamarillo as an understory, and you have taro and cocoa yam and cassava as a root yield. That changes from climate to climate. Then you have understory productive trees like feijoa, guava, and citrus, and large herbs like bananas. And then you have support species like the ice cream bean and the tipuana tipu and casuarina. They're large trees, but they continue to support the forest by cycling nutrient. You also have understory nitrogen fixers like the acacias and the leucaena and the cassia and albizia species. They're all really good, fast-functioning, fast-carbon pathways that fix nitrogen and can be chopped to the ground for mulch as the space that they're occupying can be taken up by the productive species. Here we have rose apples, mulberry, we have large legume trees, and we have large fruit trees. So we have jackfruit, the largest fruit in the world. We have bunya pine, a very large nut, but we also have pecan, which is a nut tree here that's also deciduous, loses its leaves in winter. Then we have your classic mango as a large overstory tree. These are all space occupiers in a system that's incredibly stable when all the layers are complete and occupied. Food forests by planting support species at the same time as the fruit trees and managing the support species to shelter and boost the productive species. Or we can just plant the pioneer support species until we get a stable canopy. But we don't want to go the other way round. We don't want to start with the productive species and work hard with lots of inputs to keep them in a healthy state. The support species do the work for us. It can be up to 95% of the mass in the early years are the legume trees and the mulch producing trees that produce the biomass. We prune these, and these trees shed nitrogen to the soil because they have relationships. They're classic pioneers, and most are nitrogen fixing species. In other words, they have rhizobium bacterial partners in the soil that take nitrogen from the air in the soil and bring it into their plant bodies, and they then eventually die, and that nitrogen is added to the soil. Now we can speed that process up. We can sacrifice those species with good timing after we've put them into relative placement. So over time, the species we sacrifice open up opportunities for our productive species. They shelter and support and provide the fertilizer, the soil conditioning, and the humus. So we stack the system in space, but we prune in relation to time. So we wait for the time of year when there is more rainfall than evaporation. After the period where it's been dry and the evaporation is higher than rainfall, there we need shade, and we leave the shade up. But as soon as the rainfall gets heavier and higher than the evaporation, we can start to cut and open up light avenues and space for our productive species to take up the gap. Now, over time, when we get to establishment, we've got less and less mass in pioneer support species and more mass in the productive species. And we end up with a reversal of mass. We have 95% productive and only 5% in support. So we don't just stack in space, we stack in time. We can use animals to help us establish food forests. We can graze with larger animals, then they have to be out of the way because we're putting in small plants. We can put in poultry, chickens and ducks, and they can prepare the ground. And then later on, when the trees are up, we can bring in maintenance cycles of chickens and ducks to speed the system up. And that way we can use our animals to gain an advantage while they're productive for us at the same time. I'm sitting in a food forest that's been recovered by ducks. This section here was well out of maintenance. I had quite a lot of long clumping grasses and unwanted plants we call weeds. We've put a fence around it, a temporary fence, electric fence, but we haven't even electrified it. We put in 100 or so Muscovy ducks. In just over 3 weeks, they've totally changed the area. They've eaten most of the green material. They've flattened out the grasses, they've manured the ground, they've conditioned the soil, and it's ready for replanting with the support species and interplants and fruit trees where there's gaps. taking this time advantage, this process of dynamic event, we can now jump in and put in a whole assembly of plants that'll bring it to a diverse interactive stability and possibly go right through to maintenance without ever needing this event to happen again. This is taking time advantage from an animal interaction to a replant, which we can do any time we slip up on our maintenance. And I'm at Jerash at the UN funded project, and this is the olive grove, 1,000 square meters of monoculture olives that we're converting to a diverse food forest, a kind of polyculture. I've got all my students here who are on the practical course and they're loving it. We've brought some extra trees, some extra fruit trees and some extra support species and some ground covers, and we're going to increase the diversity because we're going into winter. Let me give you a walk around this system, meet some of my students and see what it is we're doing. This is exciting. So here we are. We're going to diversify a lot of this site today. We're adding extra fruit trees. Here's a citrus just gone in and a second citrus. Leucaena waiting to be planted. I haven't started the ground cover yet. We'll get onto that soon. We've positioned our Leucaena. There's going to be a Leucaena on either side of every single productive tree. And some Leucaena that have gone well, we're already pruning. We're pollarding Leucaena. And there's students everywhere doing a bit of chop and drop, spreading Leucaena mulch around the trees. We've got that high nitrogen chop and drop mulch going in. It's even got some eucalypt. So we've got eucalypt here, a bit of a syntropic-esque variation. And we're pruning those to be a standard so we can keep them in control. And they're going to go to allelopathic. So it's an action scene here at the moment. This is the windy end of the site. So we've decided to bring in some casuarina. And we have a casuarina here. And we've got 2 casuarinas for the end of each row. And that's really a wind buffer. So lots of action, a lot happening, and all improving the site with extra fruit trees, extra diversity, and some extra mulch as well. And we're spreading compost. So we've got lots of compost, loads of compost. Here's our ground cover we brought up from Green in the Desert. We've got sea purslane, which should go like a rocket. And then we've got a few trees still to be positioned here, mostly Leucaena and some casuarina. It's mainly the interplants that we need to do, but there has been some fruit trees go in already. I'm so pleased to see this. It's given people a lot of hope. A lot of people have asked us online, I've wondered what to do with my monoculture olives. Here you go. Mulberry, mandarin, fig, mulberry, Leucaena, fig, apricot, all diversified, and then we've got ground covers as well. So we have a sage here too. We have a sage that they've put in that smells really strong, a ground cover sage, big leafy sage, I think it is. And they say that traditionally keeps away snakes because there's some fear of there being wildlife and snakes in amongst this leafy ground cover that's going to emerge. Here's a nice apricot. What a lovely scene. Just imagine it in 2 or 3 years' time. It's going to be great. Some Leucaenas have gone really well. So this one's going to have a heavy prune down to 1 stem and then its head taken off so it'll pollard.
The concept of the rational harvestable food forest, so specializing upon certain crops within the food forest concept and taking care of the ecology enough, is convincing the first farmers already. So we have rows of one species, but still it is a polyculture and still it's tens of different edible species. If the cider apples are ripe, the trees are just in a row and you can pick them walking the row. There's a lot of money going on in modern farming, but it's not going to the farmers themselves that much. They work very hard, but they have to pay the bank, they have to pay the chemical industry. A food forest is totally different. We don't have those high costs. We produce food more and more during the growth of the system, and we, in our relatively young food forests, earn already 3,000 euros per hectare per year, which is 8-9 times as much as the neighboring farms.
Montado is a cultural landscape. A cultural landscape, it's when a landscape or the result of the interaction of man and nature shaped us. We must be part of the nature, making useful things for nature, being an element of nature. And then we can take with happiness our part, like the birds take their part, like the bacteria use their part,